Okay, we're live now, so we can go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. So first, oh, go ahead.
Okay. Do we just want to start with the bullet points on the case study 5 paper? You just want to do it that way?
I think that's a good way to do it.
It was kind of a confusing story, so it might be good to clear up any questions people had.
And the story's really short.
It is. It's really short.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first one is briefly summarize the case.
Okay.
So I can start the way I understood it, and then you guys can clear up if I made it or if there's anything I got wrong. So it starts out with Mahmoud, and he's playing in the doorway, or well, it's like a scene, but anyways, he gets hurt in the doorway from a rocket shrapnel that hit him, and his sister takes him back to his dad. And then his dad talks about having deja vu from in the past when Mahmoud's older brother was killed, right?
Yeah.
And then it goes through and talks about how he was treated in the hospital and he recovered, but he has his arm is in a sling. And then his dad talks about how he starts beginning to have memories of the past tragedies. It says about 4 years ago, right? So then it talks about how Mahmoud's older brother Ahmed was 7 years old and he was killed. And then that's the part that I found confusing, because then they switched to, at that point, the dad, Osama, went out of work, and then his brother, Allah, helped him out with, it sounds like work, because he owned a construction company, and then also there was international assistance. And then they had another son who they renamed Ahmed. And then the brother talks about how Osama started having a lot of grief because sons are so valuable in their culture, and then that led a daughter who suffered from fits of anger and needed to go through psychiatric care. And then it talks about how he was so angry that he just wanted to get a gun and go kill Israelis. And then it goes on and talks about how they have a picture of the son that died named Ahmed that was digitally altered to show him in a graduation cap and gown.
Well, with him wanting to kill the person, I would add that they specify, like many other people, it's not a him-specific issue. The Palestinians and Jews have a conflict as a general rule.
I'm going to go through and fix all of these notes, by the way. I'm just trying to go fast and I can't remember how everything's spelled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was pretty good of a summary, Casey. Yeah, I feel like that pretty much summarized what it goes through. Basically, the family suffered twice with rocket attacks from Israel, and kind of displays the negative side effects from both the children and the father's perspective. You don't really hear very much about the mother, but you definitely hear about the father. So I thought that was a pretty good summary on there.
Yeah, it might be important to note that it was, 4 years apart?
Mm-hmm. One was in 2008 and the other one was in 2012. That was like when the first rocket attacks actually started. Does anyone have any questions about the actual summary, like the actual situation, before we jump into other stuff?
No, I don't.
Was it just me, or did the case study sound like it was just the words from maybe like a video?
Well, there was a video that you could have watched. So I think that they did take the video and just
There was a podcast or something.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause I think that's why a lot of the details were kind of sounded jumbled, but
Yeah.
for the most part, I understand.
It definitely wasn't as detailed as any of our other case studies because it was from an actual like news corporation. So it didn't sound like they took as much time to actually go through in depth of what the family was experiencing, aside from the key
Right.
points.
You feel like it was kind of short? Like I felt like I was scrolling and I thought it was going to be so much longer, and oh, it's done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, with the bullets at the end for additional resources, is this supposed to be helping him in a foreign country or additional resources as if he's a refugee? Because what we can do in America is not the same as what we would offer if we're trying to help him in his own country.
I think that in of itself would be a great comment to make, is that like looking at it from the two different perspectives of this is what we could do in America, but because they're in an international war zone, these are some things we might have to consider in providing additional resources for them. Like the fact that he gets international assistance probably from the US because of what's going on. Because I know that the US provides a lot of assistance to like Palestine or like Pakistan and other areas. So, I mean, there may be some type of government aids from the US that would be used to provide help for his family in that specific situation. I think that's a great point just to bring up the fact that there's differences.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think that is really good. It's something I didn't consider because I kind of struggled, like I don't understand their culture, but him becoming a refugee in and of itself could be a resource if there was nothing there.
Yeah, like providing an opportunity for them to move to the United States to give their family a chance to recover and start a different life. That may help the family to, you know, come closer together and actually be able to move on, because it sounds like the father still kind of harbors some resentment and sadness about the actual attacks because of their son's death, which is totally understandable, but it might actually help them move on from that instead of kind of just staying in that static zone.
I think this is really good, and I think that we should like keep talking about it, but I just wanted to say that I think something else that we should think of it as is just like, remember that we need to use the principles that we've been learning. So like just kind of like, I think we should talk about how we can help them, like you guys were talking about, refugees have different resources than we do, and things like that. But also just in a way of like, if we were a therapist helping them, how, like what models and things would we use? I think those are two like good principles that we could like, or two different points that we could put in our summary or in our little write-up.
Yeah, like moving on to the next one, what principle or concept would that fall under?
Yeah.
Obviously resources, which is in many of the models that we've studied.
Yeah.
So in chapter 10, they discuss under the crest, whatever that word is, about encouraging a positive outlook. And it had said that despair is kind of a killer, and that hope fuels effort for them to succeed.
I think that's really good. Having just helping people understand how to have a positive outlook. I liked how we read about the 3 different types of families or couples that lived in war zones, and how each one like had a different perspective, and how that perspective helped them deal with the problems that they were having and develop their relationship as a couple.
Yeah, it wasn't so much like I love how the topic describes how in some cases the level of exposure does kind of have an effect on the marital satisfaction, but also more importantly, it's the way that the family responds to the situation, how resilient they are. And I think that's part of it, is having that positive outlook, and taking it as, I feel like they kind of just really use their resiliency well, and understanding their resources and understanding what they can do, instead of just consigning themselves to, this is what's happening to me, I'm becoming a victim. Because like the family shows that they can be creative in the way they show affection to each other as a couple, and that shows that they're resilient in a way, like they're able to make things different that helps them in the long run to not be as affected, I feel like.
That's what I kind of liked about the typology model, because like you guys were saying earlier, they don't talk much about the mother. And so the typology model, they'd be able to look at how their adjustment level was before. And, you know, were they a cohesive family, a resilient family? How was their communication? And then they recognize this crisis, and then they can look at it and say, well, how can we adjust or adapt and make this better?
Yeah, that kind of goes along with, they also discuss exploring spiritual dimensions, and that you have to keep the faith-based practices a part of all of your health efforts to help. And so the article even specifies the importance of the men, and so we have to remember that when we're helping them.
That's a good point.
So far, are we talking like the typology model and resilience is kind of the principles or concepts to apply to
that's what I was just going to say is Elena, are you putting that under the, because I didn't read that one off, under the principles and concepts that can be applied for help?
Okay, so I have been putting all of this under like the resources, teaching families, you know, that's kind of what I've been like focusing on right now, but I will also
You could probably apply to both.
That's what I was just going to say. I think it'll fit in both.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many models, and I think that in each of them, like you can pull something. Like I, for some reason, always go back to the ABCX model. I don't know why that one has got me, but like the cognition part of it, like that's always something that I continually go to. I guess because I use it a lot with my kids, but I love that. I think it can be put in any situation, really.
Well, I think it's something that like really applies, like you said, to a lot of situations, and it's also really simple.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's
that's what,
easy to understand, and it's simple, and it's I think that like the FAR model, the typology model, a lot of these other models are really good, but they're a little bit more complicated. And so if you're just looking at something, it's like, okay, this, you can kind of plug everything in really easily.
Yeah, that's probably why I like it too. Anyways, so are you guys, do you want to move on from that one, or does anybody have anything else like under the principles and concepts part of it and the resources?
I kind of wanted to ask the question, like, what do we think would help them be able to communicate more as a family? Because I feel like a big part of them being able to overcome like these tragedies in their life is being able to communicate better as a family.
So one of the things I was just going to pose something like that, but one of the things that I feel like would be really effective is in one of my other classes too. I think we've talked about it in this one as well, but the use of like a family council.
Oh yes.
Because that gives, so the daughter goes through these psychological, like she needs psychiatric help because probably partially because of like post-traumatic stress disorder, which probably affects her anxiety and her fear of something else happening again. I mean, she's seen one of her brothers die and one of her other brothers get attacked. So she probably has a lot of things that like she's feeling, but also because the men are the most important like part of their culture, like they're very highly emphasized. She's probably feeling a lack of attention and a lack of resources, which is why she's kind of responding in the way she is. So I feel like having a family council would give each of their members equal. I don't know how it would work in their culture, but it would give them each a chance to express their thoughts and feelings about what's going on, which would aid in that double ABCX model of determining what their thoughts are about what's going on, which would then be able to help them kind of move on from there, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And I think with that, I always think of when I think of family councils are mood logs. A lot of times I think that those kind of go together, and I think that might be good for them each to individually, especially the dad, to kind of understand really how he's feeling about the things that are going on in his family's life. Because I think just as you said that the daughter is having maybe a hard time because the males in her life are experiencing these really bad things happening to them. He also, as a man trying to provide and protect his family, probably has a lot of insecurities about what's going on around him.
Mm-hmm.
So that would help him understand himself so that he could better communicate with his family, right?
Yeah. Well, it could probably help them understand why he's reacting the way he is too.
Yeah.
Oh, and the daughter.
Yeah,
I think it would be
right here.
allocating resources and learning how to utilize them, because it doesn't sound like everyone really understands what resources they have. Because the dad turns to his brother, which is probably something that they're obviously we go to our family first for help, and then he goes to find international assistance, but still the daughter doesn't sound like she has a ton of resources. You don't really hear very much about Mahmoud's the way that he goes through his own personal challenge of overcoming his injury, and he probably feels some of the negative aspects of his dad's deja vu. So I don't know, I feel like them kind of discussing their resources and learning how to use it together as a family would be really beneficial.
They also brought up restabilizing with distribution, and that the way to foster resilience and get them back on track is to get them back doing normal routines. So for her to regain her stability and support for her family, they have to get back to doing what they were doing before all of this started.
The one thing that would be hard though to do, or how do I want to word it? Because it doesn't talk about the mother. So you have we have no idea how his relationship with his wife is and how that is affecting their children either. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of vague right there, because that's an important part.
But given their culture, it's kind of assumed that the woman's opinion isn't going to be mattering very much. I mean, they state in it how important the men are. So it just makes sense that they didn't bring her up.
That is true. So, but the daughter was brought up, so that's why I found it interesting that the mother wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're talking about family councils and things like that, then that's why I brought that up, is because it's a little vague on that. But the culture, yes, that makes sense.
One thing I thought about too is the principle of pile-up stressors that you see in most models. Because they had all these things. They had the loss of their first son, the loss of the husband's job, the injury of the younger son, the daughter and her need for psychiatric care. So if they were able to look at all of that with a model, and I really like the typology model because it includes the families, the family culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, then they can look at all of it that they're going through and what kind of relationships they have. And then also they may not even realize that they've been using resources in the brother and in international assistance. So if they could recognize all that, then they can begin to brainstorm and problem solve and say, these are our problems, and then look at, these are resources, and then maybe begin to look at other resources like refugee programs that we were talking about earlier.
Okay. Do you think we have enough on the resources and the concepts part of it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Then
named it all that I wanted to say.
okay, so the next one is list relevant risks and dangers the family and its members face.
I just put like I can't remember which week it is that we read that What About Us article, because they are so focused on the grief in their son, like, and it's emphasized by the fact that their sons are very important to them and that they would rename their son, was it Ahmed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then the dad even says, I highlighted it because it really hit me. He talked about you could have as many babies as you want, but it still wouldn't be enough. So it seemed to me like he was trying to replace his son in a way, but it still wasn't enough. And
Well,
so
I
I think
think
they really risk I forgot they really risk at not recognizing their children who are also struggling because they're so focused on the son.
right. I think that another thing that they probably have to, I mean, every day they have that fear of, or that risk of losing another child or even being killed themselves. So that's got to be like, I can't even imagine, honestly, like the anxiety. When I have anxiety and I don't even live somewhere like that. But I think that's another, like the risks of, I mean, they face that risk every day.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I'm wondering because at that one part in the case study, it brought up how he wanted a gun so he could kill other Israelis. And so, like, the fact that he's not dealing with his anger correctly, he could have the danger of attacking other innocent people and maybe even getting killed himself in the process. It just doesn't sound like a healthy way of dealing with it.
no.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Given that they're in a chronic war zone, I wrote down PTSD because there's going to be a lot of constant flashbacks happening for all of them, not just the dad.
That is a good one. I didn't think about that one.
With kind of like developing severe anxiety or PTSD, because I remember in the like very first 2 weeks or something, you know, we did a lot of talking about anxiety and panic attacks and things like that. And I remember reading about how you really can, like, you're not just always born with it. It's not like always a chemical imbalance or whatever, you know, it's something that you really can develop and have for the rest of your life if you don't take care of it, or if you do take care of it, you still might have it the rest of your life.
Yeah. I think another thing too is like going back to the mood logs and everything. Part of the reason why mood logs are so effective is they help you weed out the unrealistic thoughts that you're getting, which is contributing to your anxiety and your negative emotions, and replacing them with realistic thoughts. The risk that they have right now is that if they don't cope with what they're going through, their entire reality will be shifted to an unrealistic thought because, like you said, they're going to be filled with anxiety because they will be thinking about all these negative risks of living in the war zone they have. And so I feel like everything will just kind of compile into them having unrealistic thoughts and anxieties. Like, although there is realistic anxieties, they'll just be filled with a lot more that could be avoided if they were to work together as a family to kind of overcome that.
I
That's
hear that. That's good.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Because I can imagine, like, I suffer from anxiety, and what you said was exactly like when it gets to a point where you constantly like, well, what if? Well, what if? Or, and it's exhausting. So I can imagine. Anyways, I can imagine being in that type of situation. It'd be hard to deal with.
Does anyone have any other risks or dangers that they had written up earlier?
I already talked about the few that I had.
Me too.
You want to move on?
Yeah, I think that brings us pretty well into the next little, like, what opportunities they have.
Okay. List relevant opportunities presented to this family as a result of this crisis. I think one main thing, if they could learn how to cope and communicate, like maybe through family council or, you know, doing the mood logs and things, if that were resources that were available, they would become closer as a family and learn. And I think even though you're married in a family, you can always learn from each other, and you can learn more about each other. So that's something I think that would be an opportunity that they could. Oh, how do I want to word that? Anyways, you know the point I was getting at.
Yeah.
Yeah, to go with.
Oh, go
Sorry.
ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it kind of comes back to that, those articles that we read about those couples, that some of them, you know, they really had that opportunity to become closer, to learn to lean on each other, to learn how to trust each other more, because they're put in a situation where they can't trust a lot of people.
Yeah, that's kind of where I pulled that from, is after I read that. That's what I thought about.
So I thought about the Zach story, and that one of the positive things they could take from this is valuing their time that they have together, that everyone takes.
That's a really good one.
So my thought is, like, I don't know if you guys can tell me if you don't want to add this, but I don't understand the culture, and so this makes it hard, but I feel like it might be a good opportunity to adjust their family structure. Like, to make, specifically with the daughter, and then whatever we don't know is happening with the mother, to make sure that the women understand that they're as equally as important. You know, because they're so focused on the loss of a son. I just feel like it would be a good opportunity to realize the women, even though have a different standing in their culture, they're just as important.
That's true.
But I struggle because I don't understand their culture, so you guys can tell me if you think that's a bad answer.
I wonder if the real question for that one would be, like, because of their cultural background, would they be able to adjust a family structure?
Yeah.
Would they allow it, or would they be willing?
Well,
I think.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, like, maybe they could adjust their structure if they left the country. I just don't see it being very practical in their society, because their religion is their life. Like, they're so intertwined that I don't think they separate very well.
So
That's a good point.
Something that I think about is when I took like the Pakistan class for your general studies, we read the I Am Malala book, and something that I really respected from that was how, like, the husband still worked, he still did, like, they still had a very like traditional cultural family structure, but kind of what you said reminded me of, like, maybe they can come to understand or realize that all life is equal. Because I feel like although they had different roles within their family, like many of us do, the father really was like, oh, my daughter needs an education, and like each life was equal, even though the mom did do the cooking and the laundry and the dad did go and work. So I think maybe by going through this, they can come to understand that each life is equal, whether you're a woman or you're a man, or what your role is in life, that if you died, it would be just as important if someone else got hurt or passed away.
Yeah, that's exactly what you just said it better than me, but that's exactly what I was trying to say, that they could realize that the women in their family, even if they don't change the roles exactly.
And maybe one of the opportunities they have too, because in their culture and in their religion, like their roles work. Like it's not that their roles don't work. It's not that their kind of structure doesn't work, but it's when those structures crumble due to stressors that causes the issue. So maybe part of that is definitely understanding that family life is valuable, but also just kind of reestablishing the roles and reestablishing what everyone needs to be able to make those roles. Like just being able to kind of restructure their family based on those same roles, I feel like that would be really beneficial too, because then they'd understand, yes, well, it's my role to do this. I can still have my needs met so that the stressor doesn't take over. And so like making sure that everyone's needs are met while they actually fill out that role that they have. I feel like that would be a really good opportunity for them as well.
What I put in here so that I understand exactly what you're saying. I put like realizing how important family life is, restructuring their family to gain stability within the family and becoming resilient to the stressors that they have. This way each family member's needs are.
Yeah, that's great. That's good.
I think it sounds good too. Are you ready to move on?
Real quick, when we were talking earlier about like getting like refugee help, would that be a relevant opportunity as well?
I think so.
Yeah. I feel like that's an opportunity for them to move to a different country, to be kind of welcomed into that country would be a great opportunity for them as well.
Out there being like war, a lot of times even countries that aren't necessarily currently in a war, when they are refugees, they go to a country that is a lot better. Like they have a lot more opportunities, or they have a lot more resources like fresh water and things like that. A lot of times, no matter what reason you need to be a refugee, you get to go somewhere better.
Like if we want to dive into that, the next one talks about important relationship considerations. If they were to become refugees, their family structure would not fit in many other countries. And so they would have to find a way to cope and assimilate their family structure to a new culture. Because where they live now, everybody kind of has the same faith and the same family values, but moving to a new country, then, you know, it affects the family because they have to find a way to assimilate into society, or that will hurt their family as well.
That is true. That's a good point. And you've seen it, like, with all the, like, I mean, I guess they're good at, you know, making sure the bad stories about refugees or their issues are brought to light, but I think most of them seem fit in well and are able to cope. And I think it's probably because of the accepting people though too. But I think it could be a stressor. Yeah. Because that's a lot to change.
Depends on where they go, because like
right.
A lot of people who come here, they're able to find communities of other people in the same exact situation they're in. But if they went, I don't know how refugees are in other countries. I know that, like, I have a friend who served in France, and there was a lot of refugees that she taught, but they also were able to have their own community because a lot of people went to that same area. So I think it depends on, like, which maybe we can't really get into this as much, but, like, you know, where they go when they.
That's true.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That might be all we have to say on that subject. We can go next to the relationship considerations.
Okay. No, important relationship considerations.
So maybe this went under dangers, but I kind of thought about the mom on this one. And when people do end up developing PTSD, they end up acting out and not meaning to. And given their culture and the woman not really being able to speak out, my concern was her safety.
That was a good point.
That is a good point.
I feel like specifically on that too, just to kind of expand on that, definitely her, like she's like a danger in and of itself, but also just her and her husband's interactions. I always feel like that's like the first thing that I post on any of my case studies, because the marriage relationship is paramount. Like everything else will crumble if the marriage relationship does not work out correctly. So I feel like that's like the first consideration, is to make sure the husband is getting what he needs from his wife, but also that she's getting what she needs in order to not feel overwhelmed with the stressor of losing her own, like her first son, having her second son injured, because she doesn't, like, we don't even have any information about what she's going through. So making sure that, you know, Osama knows how to take care of her and she helps him, especially during his kidney operations and everything like that, to make sure that they both are strengthened by each other instead of polarized.
Yeah. I was kind of wondering too, like when it comes to like important relationship considerations, this case study really focused on like the father and the son's relationship, at least after the son's death, and how much that was affecting Osama. So I probably just in general, that relationship is a consideration in the case study.
Well, in that culture too, and that story kind of talked about it, the like how important the sons are. Like it was very I can't even think. It was very precise on that, how important the sons are in that culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then to lose your oldest son, I think is probably, even though he had two others, still obviously was.
Do you think like the high expectations and the son's and then because the son passed away, that it caused a lot of what's it called? I guess a lot of stressors and stuff in the family because of that expectations and because they had such high value on it?
I would say so. That was
father.
a question on that too, is the fact is, do you guys think that the second Ahmed would feel like an overwhelming sense of expectations from his father because he feels like he can never measure up to the first Ahmed? Like, do you guys feel like that's something to consider as well?
Yeah, I thought about that too.
Especially because they were even describing how he couldn't he could not replace the first son, so there was definitely more expectations on him.
Yeah, agreed.
I did not even.
It's like he's set up to fail because the father said, I just wanted to keep his name in the house, but he could still never replace him.
Right, that'd
to
be
me,
hard.
it sounds like the father is saying, like, I want him to, but I know he can't. So it's like that. I don't know if that what the double bind is. It this class that we read about that, where you have like you give people two messages that you can't meet one or the other. Does that make sense? Maybe that was my other class that we're taking. Like he's saying, like, I need you to replace Ahmed, but I already know you can't. So he's like doomed to fail either way.
Yeah, I think that's in the Family 400 class, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Just as like a final thought on I guess I feel like I'm speaking a lot, but I feel like another relationship is just the daughter to the parents relationship, because I feel like she kind of got skirted the high responsibilities from I think she became like the next oldest, and just like she didn't really have an avenue to overcome the stressors that she had. So I feel like that's one thing to kind of consider, is that as well.
Yeah, I didn't think about it, but you're right. She did become the oldest. Should we start talking about coping strategies?
Yeah, I was just waiting for Elena to finish typing.
Okay.
Can I say one more thing? Sorry.
Okay.
No, I like your thoughts. Go
What do
for it.
Do you guys think that there's like a relationship? So obviously Osama's brother's close with him. Like, I feel like that's something else to consider, because it almost sounds like Osama didn't really care about his life that much during the time that he lost his son Ahmed. And you can kind of tell that Allah knew that he was in a bad place and he was trying his best to help him out, but there's only so much that he could do because he was also going through struggles. So I feel like there's kind of a relationship to consider between like the nuclear family and the extended family that's around, whether or not those stressors will tear them apart, or if by Allah helping him out, if that's somehow helping their relationship to be strengthened or not. I don't know.
No, I think you're right. But the other thing about that too is that I can't remember the exact wordage, and I don't have it pulled up. But it says somewhere in there how his brother had a hard time like feeling for him because of the stressors.
Mm-hmm.
So even though he's helping, because they're dealing with their own things, it probably was hard to like really connect, because each of their stressors was so, well, it seemed like intense. Maybe not the same, but being in that type of situation. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I thought about that earlier and I didn't mention it.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. It says the brother Allah says it's hard for him to accept his brother's suffering.
Right.
And then he goes on to talk about how his health was bad. He was living in bad circumstances. And then it says that he lost half of himself when he lost his son. So his brother is carrying a lot of his grief.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, his son was like, during the same accident that killed Ahmed, Allah's son was seriously injured as well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right. That is right. So it is similar. I forgot about that, but yeah, he just didn't lose his son, but it's still got to be.
Yeah.
It could almost be like survivor's guilt. Like maybe he feels guilty that his son survived and his brother's son did not.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay. So what do you think that they're like, what are coping strategies? I feel like coping strategies kind of goes along with the principles and concepts that can be applied in offering direction for this family, like the ABCX model, the mood logs, things like that. But
yeah, I feel like this one kind of specifically says like what things are used in helping them cope. So I feel like one of the things that I wrote down on like my case study analysis was teaching them mindfulness techniques, not to help them just like say that, not to necessarily try to give them a positive outlook, but just to let them feel everything that's going on. Because I feel like an important aspect for someone to overcome the stressors is for them to just kind of accept that they are, and then for them to be able to move on to learn how to take care of those things. Like my wife and I were just talking about it, and she said that that's what her therapist did at one point, is just kind of, she didn't really tell her a lot of things to overcome it. She just told her, this is what you're feeling, and it makes sense that you're feeling those things under, like it's pretty standard that you'd be feeling those things because of what you're going through. And then that kind of helped her just kind of learn how to go forward, instead of saying like, no, what you're feeling is wrong, you should be changing what you're thinking. You should just let everything come full circle and help her feel everything. So I feel like mindfulness techniques would be a great coping strategy for them, so they can just kind of accept what's going on.
Yeah, chapter 6 kind of went along with that. They went off and they labeled it as open emotional expression so that you can all just share all of your feelings over it, not just your sadness. Like if you're really angry and resentful, that it's just all out there.
Yeah, I think that's really great, especially because it's not sounding like you're placing blame. It's just you're feeling this. So I think it's awesome.
I think contextualizing their trials also, because it could be a cultural difference again, but I find it really unhealthy that they would keep a picture that they had fabricated of their son at graduation. And so contextualizing their grief, all the crisis and the stress that they're going through, and then recognizing this has happened. I cannot change this. He's not going to grow up and graduate. And then then brainstorming and saying, what can I do? Because as soon as they do all the mindfulness techniques and they understand their emotions and they let themselves feel that, then that would help them move on if they understood what they could change and then started to look for what they can control.
That's a good point.
Do you guys remember how, like, it was several weeks ago, but we were studying a little bit on addiction recovery program and how that can be used to help families? I think some of those principles in the addiction recovery program would help them to like be able to cope together as a family, like the trusting, forgiving, stuff like that. If you just kind of go through a few of those steps as a family, probably even in the family council that we've talked about before, that might be a pretty good way to heal some things that they're feeling is painful.
I think that's a good point because there's a book that the church put out. It's called well, it wasn't the church, but the church uses it or used to. It's called He to Deliver Me from Bondage. And it's not just for addictions, but it goes through the 12-step process. And it is all those things. And it's very helpful for just getting through hardships. That's what I used it for. So I think that that's a good point. I think that those would work.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
And probably, I don't know what would fit in with the principles we've studied, but something to deal with the father's PTSD or the anxiety of like waiting for it to happen again. I don't know. You guys might have a better idea than me.
I'm trying to remember all the things that we learned in the first 1 or 2 weeks. It's hard sometimes to remember that far back.
Probably the mood logs, like Jordan was saying earlier, would play a big role in helping his anxiety.
Maybe just kind of going through all the different thoughts that you might have leading up to a flashback.
Yeah.
Can kind of start to heal and possibly even if you have enough healing from that, you could be preventing the flashback because mood logs help you to kind of implement more like better thoughts.
Or to like recognize the triggers so he could begin to change his thoughts before they take control.
Yeah. I don't know if this sounds too harsh, but honestly, I feel like if I were their therapist, I would honestly have them throw away the picture they fabricated of him graduating because that in and of itself is an unrealistic thought. And that is placing a lot of stress on the younger Ahmed, and it's just going to become a continuous trigger for the father. And I feel like before they can accept that, yes, that's not going to be a reality, but we did have 7 years with our son, I feel like it's just perpetuating a continual stressor for them. Like it's going to continue having the father think about it, which will in and of itself make it harder for Mahmoud because he was the same age and he was a son. Same kind of attack. He just got lucky. So the father would place extra expectations on him. I just feel like it's not very healthy. And I know that probably sounds strict and harsh, but I don't think that would be very beneficial for them to keep that.
No, that was my same thought. I just was too afraid to be that blunt. So good job.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought too. And that came to my mind too, because you can't, I don't know, like I lost an older sister and an older brother, and I know this doesn't have anything to do with it. My mom has never learned to cope. And for a long time, like with my brother, I mean, of course you're going to put him, like, you know, she has pictures of each one of us on the wall or whatever, but she had other stuff like everywhere, like, and she still today can't. And it affected us all because she never learned to grieve or to cope, and she still holds a lot of, I don't know what, but it's not good. And I think part of that is there were so many, you know, I mean, I come from a big family, but that played that same type of thing. Obviously not that exact thing, but it was hard on us. Like really hard. And our child, you know, it was tough. So I can say that from experience, because it was, I mean, even though I was a daughter, but my brothers even, you know, it was, yeah, it was pretty much exactly what you said. Just a trigger of, and it was constant, and it still is. So.
So maybe you might have an insight into like this net. I think that was super relevant. And I think that like for recommendation to supporting or involved parties, what, I mean, we're all going to share, but like, what do you think would be something good to help them, that like someone from the outside could help them with their family going through this trial?
Well, one of our counselors in our stake presidency is a family friend, and they lost their son 3 years ago, right before Christmas, on his way home with his new fiance. So it was really, really sudden and very tragic and very hard. And I know his wife still is going to grief counseling. And I was just talking to him a few months ago, and one thing that he said was, it is so helpful. It hurts still, but it is so helpful when people bring up memories. And like we were talking about with the risks, you know, they're focusing on what could have been. So it could help for people to help them remember memories of their lost son so that they can enjoy the time that they did have with him.
So I added because, yeah, I spent a lot of time in chapter 6, but they brought up a lot of points about financial strain and how that just makes the situations worse. And since the church for us always says go to family first, then I would say that if the extended family is helping, that they should provide whatever financial support they can so that the family can focus on their emotional issues.
I also saw that, you know, they talk about how Mahmoud goes back to school and he gets excited because there was a ceasefire signed. One of the things that I thought would be beneficial for the children themselves is school and counselors in the school to provide counseling and just extra attention to the children to help them feel important and help them feel like kind of not like the shadow child that they may feel like at home. It would just provide an extra avenue for them to feel like there's someone as an advocate on their side. I feel like that would just be something beneficial. So the school's reaching out to the children.
Like someone reaching out and saying, how are you doing? Not how's your father? How's your injured brother?
Mm-hmm. Also, just one other thought too. I feel like because the government could be a factor here, like they got a ceasefire signed. I feel like one thing that I read about later on is like in 2014, a bill was passed or a law was passed to help prevent future rocket attacks. So I feel like as a recommendation, just have like the the government look out for the Palestinians, because it seems like those were the ones that were targeted culturally from the Israelis. So I feel like that's one thing too.
Like, is the U.S. government or is that their government?
I don't know if it said the U.S. government or not, but I feel like because we're providing, a lot of times we provide, like the U.S. provides assistance.
Yeah, so our soldiers would be there.
Yeah, I feel like that would be something beneficial, as for the U.S. government to look into helping those people in Gaza specifically.
Okay. I think like for the brother and also for them, for like this family also, but we're mostly focusing on this family, is that the brother can try to go through, like, help himself so that he can also give emotional support to his brother. So I think that what we talked about a little bit is how it's having a hard time having empathy, or, you know, like he helped him get a job and stuff, but really having that empathy. And I think that they need to have that for each other to be able to help them from outside. I think that's all the questions. Anybody else?
I think for additional resources, let's see. I feel like specifically like grief counseling, like post-traumatic stress counseling for the family and for the daughter. I feel like those are just some additional resources too.
The refugee program is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I can't remember what we put on that already, but those, I don't think that those were some of them. We talked about a lot, even though the story was not very long. I thought we got a lot of good insight and good discussion.
Yeah. Sorry, just a second, guys. My wife's like 39 weeks pregnant right now, and she's calling me. So I need to make sure that she's not going into labor or anything. Just a second.
That'd be exciting if it was.
We're like, oh, we got a message.
Yeah.
Like, oh, congrats.
Yeah, good luck.
Casey, when's your baby due?
So I'm due in 2 weeks. So I'm about 38
Ah.
weeks. Isn't it? Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? I mean, we covered each point, but is there anything else anyone wanted to add?
That's all I can think of.
I think it went well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this and kind of put it more in like paragraphs and all that jazz. And then if you guys just want to look at it right before I turn it in, and just if you have anything else you want to add or reword or whatever, and then when everyone's done looking at it, I can turn it in. It seems like some of you guys are busy, so maybe it won't get looked at that much, but
No, I'll look at
make
it.
sure that we have the A-okay.
I'm going to post that link on there as well. So I'll look at it definitely tonight as well, and just let you know if there's anything I see.
Okay.
Yeah, when are you thinking of sending it?
Probably, I'll probably send it Saturday morning. I'll probably work on it tomorrow night. I don't really have time to work on it tonight. But probably tomorrow I'll work on it when I get home from work. So I'll probably have it done at around like 9. And
Okay.
so if you guys just want to look at it between then and Saturday, I mean, I'll be home all day Saturday. So,
Okay.
So maybe we should just email you back, or maybe put on the text that we've looked at it.
Yeah, that's perfect. Especially if you put it on the text, that's super easy for me to just
Yeah.
see it on there.
Okay.
Works for me.
Okay.
Me too.
All right. Good luck to your wife, Jordan, whenever it happens.
Yes.
Thanks. She's been trying to get things started. She tried
for her.
today at the Provo Hill and nothing.
Oh man, I feel for
Castor oil.
I don't know if she wants to be in pain for that long afterwards.
No, it's like really. So mix it with like a Mountain Dew, just saying, something with the carbonation and the oil. It'll get you going. Get her going.
I tell her you said that. I tell her you go.
Let me know if she does it and it works, and I'll try it too.
It worked with my last one. I'm just saying. I had a friend that worked with 4 of her kids, so I mean, there's 5. Anyways.
All right. Cool.
All right, everybody.
Good
Have
luck.
a good night.
Okay. See ya.
Yes.